All right, let's just dive right into this. You know, tucked away in the very first book of the Bible, there's a story that is so strange and so brief that most of us just read right past it. But it's a story about fallen angels, forbidden knowledge, and a world that got corrupted not just by sin, but by secrets. This is the story of the Watchers.
So the whole mystery kicks off with this one really perplexing phrase. The book of Genesis mentions a group called the Sons of God. But who were they exactly? The Bible doesn't really spell it out, but their actions were about to change the entire course of human history and bring about a judgment on a, well, global scale.
Now, what's really fascinating here is just how little information we're actually given. Genesis 6 introduces these beings, tells us they are children with human women, mentions these giants called the Nephilim, and then that's it. The story just moves on. It's an incredible cliffhanger that has left people scratching their heads for millennia, asking, wait, what was the full story here?
And you know, this isn't just a puzzle for us today. The vagueness of this passage created an enigma that ancient people were just as desperate to solve as we are. They wanted to fill in the blanks. They needed to understand what this heavenly transgression was all about.
So here's the key thing to remember. The standard biblical text itself just doesn't give us the answers. To really get to the bottom of this ancient mystery, we have to look beyond the pages we're familiar with, to books that were lost, hidden, and for a long, long time, forbidden.
So where do we find these answers? Well, the story really picks up in the 20th century, with what has to be one of the most important archaeological discoveries of all time. This is where we start to find the missing pieces.
It's 1947, and some Bedouin shepherds literally stumble upon these clay jars in the caves of Qumran, and inside, the Dead Sea Scrolls, an absolute treasure trove of ancient Jewish texts, many of which no one had laid eyes on for nearly 2,000 years. And right there, in that lost library, we find the missing parts of our puzzle.
But, you know, these texts didn't just hand over simple answers on a silver platter. As this quote shows, discovering the scrolls just opened up a whole new world of debate. This isn't some settled history. It's a live, ongoing investigation into our past. And that just shows you how deep this mystery really goes.
Now, among all these incredible texts, one of the most important is the Book of Enoch. And while you won't find it in most Bibles today, back in antiquity, it was a hugely influential book. And its claim? It claims to tell the full story of Genesis 6, the story that the Bible only hints at.
So what does Enoch tell us? It reveals that these sons of God weren't just any old angels. No, they were a specific, high-ranking order with a very special name, the Watchers. And their sin? Well, it was far greater than anyone could have imagined.
The Book of Enoch lays it all out. It says 200 of these Watchers, led by an angel named Shemhaza, they all got together and made a pact. They descended from their posts up in heaven, driven by lust for human women, and just completely abandoned their sacred duty.
And that seems like the main thing, right? Angels leaving heaven for women, that's a big deal. But the Book of Enoch says, hold on, that was only the beginning of the crime. The far, far greater sin was what they decided to teach their new partners.
And this is the absolute heart of the story. The Watchers didn't just sin with their bodies. They sinned by sharing divine secrets. They gave humanity knowledge it was never, ever meant to have. And in doing so, they basically shattered the barrier between heaven and earth.
I mean, just take a second to look at this list of so-called rejected mysteries. It's such a wild mix. On the one hand, you've got this really powerful stuff like sorcery and how to make weapons, things that obviously fueled the violence that was about to consume the world. But then you have things that seem almost trivial, right? Cosmetics and jewelry. The text even names the angel, Aziel, who specifically taught women how to make eye paint and craft ornaments. The idea was this would help them seduce even more angels and corrupt humanity through vanity.
So, what happened when humanity got its hands on all these secrets? Did it lead to some great enlightenment? Nope. According to the story, it led to total and complete corruption.
This right here sets up such a fascinating contrast. You see, the Book of Enoch talks about two kinds of heavenly knowledge. The prophet Enoch, he gets taken up to heaven and shown the real secrets of the cosmos, things like astronomy and meteorology, and that leads to wisdom. But the knowledge the Watchers give to women, it's all earthy. It's focused on vanity, violence, magic. The book creates this really clear gendered split. Men get divine wisdom, while women get these corrupting secrets.
The result was an absolute catastrophe. Armed with the knowledge of how to make metal, humans forged swords and shields, and suddenly war was everywhere. Adorned with cosmetics and jewelry, vanity and lust just spread like wildfire. The world became so violent, so corrupt, that divine intervention was the only answer. This forbidden knowledge from the Watchers is presented as the direct cause of the Great Flood.
Now, this is such a powerful, detailed story. It explains so much, which leads to the big question. Why isn't it better known? Why isn't this part of the biblical canon, the official collection of accepted scriptures?
And here's the crucial thing. For a long time, it wasn't forgotten at all. As modern scholars point out, for the first few hundred years, early Christian writers and communities treated the Book of Enoch as scripture. They saw it as an absolutely essential text for understanding their world.
And why was it so important? Well, because it answered one of the biggest questions in all of theology. Where does evil come from? The story of the Watchers gave a very clear answer. Evil wasn't something humans invented. It was like a foreign technology, a set of forbidden secrets that were introduced into the world by these rebellious divine beings.
But, over time, the theological tides began to shift. Really influential thinkers like Augustine, writing around the 4th and 5th centuries, started to argue against this idea. He totally rejected the notion of angels physically procreating with women, basically calling those stories fables. And as other explanations for evil, like the whole Adam and Eve story, became more popular, the story of the Watchers got pushed to the sidelines and eventually was left out of most versions of the Bible.
And that really brings us to our final thought. The story of the Watchers is this powerful reminder that the texts we have today are just one part of a much larger, much more complex conversation that was happening in the ancient world. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other incredible stories, what other forgotten worlds are just lying in wait, ready to be rediscovered, just beyond the edges of the pages we all think we know so well?